Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retribution Studios. This is the first video in a series of videos that I'm going to do, first covering the basics of Magic, then going more in depth on things that you can do, colloquialisms, terms, and just excitement about the Commander format. I'm not sure how long I'll keep this project going. I think there's a lot to cover. You basically can get a college degree in Magic. That's how much knowledge there is out there. But today, we're just going to talk about the different card types in Magic, because I think that's the best place to start when teaching someone. So, let me actually orient these towards the camera. There are a couple different card types, and I'm just going to go over the basics for now. So, starting with lands. Lands are your resources, essentially. Once per turn, you may put a land into play. That is a special, it's called a special action. That's something that you can do on your turn. A land has a color associated with it. These are the 5 basic core lands. So swamps tap for black mana, islands tap for blue mana, plains tap for white mana, forests tap for green mana, and mountains tap for red mana. Now you may be asking, what does he mean by tap? So when you tap something, you turn it 90 degrees and it generates a resource. In the case of a land, it is used until your next turn. So taking a look at this first spell, don't worry about anything that it does or what kind of spell it is at the moment, but up here in the top right corner, there are 2 little mana symbols. So this spell costs 2 blue to cast. So in the case of our lands here, I would have to be able to tap 2 islands to be able to cast this spell. That is the basics of lands. There are lands, and these are the basics, and then there's non-basic lands. Let me see if I can find one real quick. That is a subtype. Sometimes non-basic lands will have some other effects, or they'll tap for multiple colors. In the case of this, Rupture Spire, it says, Rupture Spire enters the battlefield tapped, so it comes in used. You can't use it for the turn. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you pay 1. But then, after you do that, it taps for any color. But that is getting a little bit more advanced. The different card types, I'm going to sort these real quick here. Did I not grab an instant? I did, okay. Let's start with creature, because I think that's what most people think of when someone mentions Magic. So this guy is a creature. Creatures usually have a subtype as well. So in the case of Dowser of Light, he is a Horror, H-O-R-R-O-R, not with a W. The main thing that's going to be important is, once again, he has a mana cost. I think this is where a lot of people get tripped up in Magic, what can be confusing. Mana cost is in the top right corner. So he has a 4, and then he has the skull symbol. You might think that he costs 4 mana. He actually costs 5. The 4 in the circle, you can pay with any colors that you want. So if I had these 5 lands, let me get back in focus, I could tap all of them. So these 4 would pay for the 4, and then the black would pay for the black. In the case of the first spell, I'd have to tap 2 blue. But with him, he only has the 1 pip. So I just have to tap 5 total, and at least 1 source has to be black. Creatures have a statistic in the bottom, so I'm looking at this upside down, bottom right corner, these 2 numbers. So 4 over 5. 4 is representative of his power. That's basically how much damage he can do. Whereas 5 is representative of his toughness, how much damage he can take for the turn. I'll go more in depth on creatures later. The next card type that we have is an enchantment. So an enchantment is something that sticks around the battlefield unless something happens to it, and it has some sort of effect. So in the case of Intangible Virtue, once again, it costs 1 mana and a white. So it costs 2 total. One of those sources has to be white. It says creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. So that's a lot to chew, and we'll come back to that. But just keep in mind that enchantments typically have a static effect. unless they are a different type of enchantment called an aura. So an aura goes specifically on a creature. So we have our Dowser of Light on the battlefield. I can cast this Aqueous Form for 1 blue. That's all it costs, 1 blue. So it enchants the creature, and it says enchanted creature can't be blocked. I'll get to what that means. Whenever you attack, whenever the enchanted creature attacks, scry 1. Again, effects that we don't need to cover today, but just know that auras attach to creatures and give solely that creature a benefit. Next up is artifacts. So these are supposed to be representative of items or token or just different physical things that aren't creatures in the worlds of Magic. So in the case of Lord Seeker's Stone, I'm reading upside down. This one just costs 6 mana of any color. So this is a colorless permanent since it doesn't have any cost associated with it that requires a colored mana symbol. Now you notice down here it says 3, and then it has like a little circle with a squiggly. That means tap. So just like lands, some things have a tap ability. And then it says draw 3 cards. This ability costs 1 more to activate for each card in your hand. So tapping an ability uses it for the turn. Now there's another kind of artifact similar to an aura called an equipment. So up here in the top, once again, it is a colorless permanent. It costs 3. That'll put it onto the battlefield. But you'll notice down here at the bottom it says equip 1. So if I have Mr. Dowser of Light and I successfully cast a what is this called? Haunted Cloak. It will cost 1 additional mana. I have to tap 1 more land to put this on the creature. The difference between auras and equipment, in the sense of, let's say my Dowser of Light were to die, if he was enchanted by the aura, it would go to the graveyard. However, the equipment stays around. Next up are instants and sorceries. I'm going to kind of cover both of these at one time. They're very similar. Instants and sorceries, after you cast them, don't stick around. So we'll start with a sorcery. It just has a one-time effect, and then it goes to the graveyard immediately. So in the case of Flood of Recollection, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, exile Flood of Recollection. In the case of this spell, it gets exiled, so you can't even recur it from the graveyard in some way. Instants and sorceries are just slightly different, but they're almost exactly the same. Draw, so in the case of this instant, Prying Eyes, draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards. What's the difference? So, a sorcery you can only cast when it is your turn, and it has to happen in your main phase, which is, as the name implies, the main place where you get to do things. However, an instant can, you can cast it on other people's turns, or you can cast it after somebody else has cast something. You can respond to their cast. This is what we call the stack. I'm gonna cover this in the next video, or possibly the one after. But I think that is a pretty good summary of the different card types of Magic and how to pay for spells. So thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate the viewership. Spread the word. I'm gonna try to make a more up-to-date series about how to play Magic and why it's such a great game. Thank you.